How did a poor black man that was an orphan born during Jim Crow, with only a sixth grade education, rise to become one of the richest black men in the United States? By all accounts, he never even stood a chance. This is his incredible story. Let's take it back to the 1930s. Banks were collapsing, factories were silent, and millions of people stood in bread lines hoping for food. The Great Depression had wiped out savings, jobs, and entire futures overnight. For Black Americans, the crisis was even worse. Most had never been allowed to build wealth in the first place. They were often the first fired and the last hired. And yet, in the middle of this economic collapse, one poor black man began building what would become, at one time, the largest black-owned company in the United States and one of the most powerful black business empires in the world, worth $400 million. His name was S.B. Fuller. Samuel B. Fuller was born on June 4, 1905, in Monroe, Ouachita Parish, Louisiana, to a family of sharecroppers. His parents worked land they did not own, earning barely enough to survive. Education was often interrupted by necessity, and Fuller was forced to drop out of school in the 6th grade to help support his family. Poverty did not allow childhood to last long. By the age of 9, he was already walking door to door selling small items, learning how to speak with strangers and persuade customers, skills that would later shape his future. As a teenager, his family moved to Memphis, Tennessee, searching for opportunity. Instead, hardship followed them. After the death of his mother and with no father present, Fuller and his 6 siblings were forced to survive largely on their own. Government relief workers offered assistance during those desperate years, but Fuller refused to accept it. He later explained that accepting relief was viewed as shameful in his community, and he and his siblings chose to work instead, determined to survive through their own effort. In 1928, Fuller joined thousands of Black Americans moving north during the Great Migration, arriving in Chicago with little money and only a 6th grade education. Like many migrants, he was driven by the belief that the North offered a chance to escape the rigid economic limitations of the South. He worked odd jobs before securing employment as an insurance representative for the Commonwealth Burial Association, a Black-owned firm. It was steady work at a time when steady work was becoming rare. Then the Great Depression struck. Businesses collapsed across the country, and millions lost everything. Fuller still had a secure position, but he wanted something more than security. He wanted ownership. He later reflected on that turning point in his life, explaining, "I've always had faith in myself and wanted to move ahead, to lift myself. I had this in me when I started my business. I was 30 then." Acting on that belief, Fuller borrowed $25 using his car as collateral, an enormous risk during such uncertain times. Alongside his future wife, Lestine Thornton, he invested in a shipment of soap and cosmetic products manufactured by Boyer International Laboratories. They began selling the products door to door throughout Chicago's Black neighborhoods. The response was immediate. Fuller understood his customers because he lived among them. Families who had been ignored by major corporations welcomed his products and his presence. Encouraged by early success, Fuller reinvested his profits and eventually invested another $1,000, an extraordinary amount during the Depression. By 1929, Fuller Products was formally incorporated. Within just 4 years, while much of the American economy remained in ruins, his company had expanded to offer more than 30 products. That $25 gamble would eventually grow into an empire. Fuller started with just $25 and built a company worth $18 million, more than $400 million in today's money. He began hiring additional salespeople, many of whom had been unable to find work elsewhere. For many Black families struggling during the Depression, the Fuller sales network became one of the few ways to earn a stable income. He was one of the main reasons Black families no longer had to depend on welfare anymore. These salespeople walked miles each day, carrying Fuller's products into communities that traditional companies had overlooked. The Great Migration continued bringing Black families into northern cities like Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland. These growing communities became the core customer base for Fuller's expanding company. By 1939, Fuller had opened his own manufacturing factory, allowing him to produce goods independently rather than relying on outside suppliers. In 1947, Fuller made one of the boldest moves of his career. He purchased Boyer International Industries, the very company that had once supplied his products, to prevent it from going bankrupt. He kept his ownership quiet at first, aware that open knowledge of black ownership could trigger backlash in a deeply segregated economy. This acquisition allowed Fuller Products to expand into deodorants, hosiery, skincare, hair products, and even clothing. His ambitions extended beyond manufacturing. Fuller acquired influential black newspapers, including the New York Age and the Pittsburgh Courier, publications that shaped public opinion and informed black communities nationwide. He also invested in department stores and purchased Chicago's Regal Theater, one of the most important entertainment venues in black America. By the 1950s, Samuel B. Fuller had achieved what once seemed impossible. Fuller Products had grown into, at one time, the nation's largest black-owned company, generating $18 million in annual sales and employing a sales force of approximately 5,000 people. Many of those salespeople would later go on to build their own successful cosmetic and business empires, carrying forward the lessons they learned under Fuller's leadership. Fuller believed strongly in productivity and independence. He hired individuals based on their ability and drive, often emphasizing that success depended on what a person could produce rather than their background. His company provided economic opportunity for thousands during a time when doors were closed elsewhere, but his success also drew controversy. In the early 1960s, a white supremacist organization known as the White Citizens Council organized a boycott against Nadal products after it became known that Fuller, a black businessman, owned Boyer Laboratories. Although his core customers remained loyal, the attacks reflected the hostility faced by black entrepreneurs operating at a national scale. At the same time, remarks Fuller made in 1963 during his induction into the National Association of Manufacturers created tension within parts of the black community. He argued that misunderstanding the capitalist system played a role in limiting economic advancement. Some interpreted his statements as minimizing the structural barriers black Americans faced, and boycotts from black leaders followed, damaging his company's public image. Further financial setbacks emerged when Fuller was charged with selling unregistered promissory notes in violation of federal securities laws. He pleaded guilty and was ordered to repay $1.6 million to creditors. In 1971, Fuller Products filed for bankruptcy protection. Although the company reorganized in 1972 and continued operating, it never regained the extraordinary scale it had once achieved. By 1976, declining health forced Fuller to step away from active leadership. Determined to preserve his legacy within the black business community, he entrusted the company's future to two of his proteges, Joe Dudley Sr. and Eunice Dudley, founders of Dudley Products. They successfully carried forward his vision, eventually absorbing Fuller's brands into their own company while maintaining its historical significance. Many of the men and women who started their careers selling Fuller products would go to build their own companies. Because of this influence, many historians consider Samuel B. Fuller the godfather of modern black entrepreneurship, mentoring a generation of business leaders who would go on to build some of the most successful black-owned companies in American history. Samuel B. Fuller died on October 24, 1988, at the age of 83. He had begun life as the son of sharecroppers, with no wealth, no formal education beyond the 6th grade, and no safety net. He entered Chicago as a poor migrant searching for opportunity. He built factories, newspapers, theaters, and a national distribution network that employed thousands. And during the worst economic collapse in modern American history, he built what became the largest black-owned company in the nation, proving that even in the face of systemic barriers and economic devastation, ownership could transform not just one life, but thousands. And that was truly foundational. Scope News tells the truth. Here are the facts. Historical records from the Chicago Defender, Black Enterprise, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, Dudley Products Archives, and Johnson Publishing Company confirm that Samuel B. Fuller was born in Monroe, Louisiana in 1905 to sharecropper parents, migrated to Chicago during the Great Migration, founded Fuller Products during the Great Depression, secretly acquired Boyer International Industries in 1947, expanded into manufacturing, publishing, and retail, and built Fuller Products into the largest black-owned company in the United States by the 1950s, before later financial and legal setbacks and his death in 1988. Legal disclaimer. This report is presented for educational, historical, and informational purposes. Scope News compiles information from historical archives, newspapers, corporate records, biographies, and publicly available sources believed to be reliable. Narrative elements are presented in a dramatic storytelling format for clarity and engagement. Some quotations reflect documented public interviews and historical reporting. This content is not intended as financial, legal, or business advice. Viewer discretion is advised, and independent research is encouraged when examining historical figures and economic events.